hello my friends, it's Gregory here with Old Europe Antique Home Furnishings, and welcome to another episode of Antique Acquisitions. I can't believe that it's already this time of year and we're talking about trends in antiques for 2025. It seems like only last week we were here discussing the trends for 2024. Anyway, I'm pretty happy with most of the things that we discussed last year. I think a lot of the trends that we talked about have really come into themselves, come into fruition. The primary thing we're going to focus on in this episode is the Asheford Institute of Antiques annual survey. We're going to see what kind of insight we can gain from that and if we can project that forward. And I hope that you enjoy my outfit here. I have to say that lately I've become enamored with 1960s vintage styles, as you can see here, except for the shirt. But I watched a few 60s movies and now all of a sudden I don't know whether I'm a detective or a spy or a professor. All right, let's get into the survey here. Okay, so before we get started here, I do want to disclose, though it's probably irrelevant, that I don't actually smoke a pipe or wear glasses. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and dispense with both of these things for the remainder of the video. Like many industries, the antique and vintage market felt the impact of rising interest rates and inflation this past year. These factors led consumers to tighten their budgets and search for deals, including decorative arts. This shift caused a notable increase in foot traffic both for brick and mortar and online businesses as shoppers sought resale bargains, boosting overall sales. While growth was seen across all sectors, certain types of antiques and collectibles stood out. Poll results revealed that while some buyers initially turned to antiques for financial relief amid rising costs, they were drawn in by other factors. It's no longer just cost-conscious millennials and Gen Z grabbing Victorian furniture bargains. Today's buyers are focused on long-term decorative investments, prioritizing sustainability, uniqueness, and eco-friendly options. Folk art made a strong return, and while popular categories like automobilia, textiles, and to a lesser extent mid-century modern remain top choices, there was a notable shift toward more traditional antiques. Early 20th century styles, which had been overlooked for years, surged in popularity. This year's buyers also reflected a broader age range. In recent years, younger generations have been leading the charge in the antique and vintage market, and that's good news. But with the resurgence of traditional antiques, we're seeing a return of baby boomers as well. The trend toward traditional styles has been a positive for many dealers as consumers continue to turn to affordable and readily available antique and vintage items to offset rising living costs. The shift away from modern aesthetics also persisted, with favorites like folk art and Victorian wicker furniture gaining ground across all groups and collectible categories. Art Nouveau, which had hovered near the top of survey results for the past 2 years, finally made a breakthrough, rising in popularity among both younger and middle-aged buyers. Meanwhile, mid-century modern, though still performing well, showed a gradual decline as evolving tastes reshape the market. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and get into the meat of the survey itself. And before we do that, I want to point out that while I do talk about and read from the Asheford Institute of Antiques survey, I am not affiliated with the school or being paid by them. Okay, so the way this survey is set up is it's divided into 3 different age groupings, and they're not age groupings of customers, they're age groupings of dealers. So we have the 20 to 40-year-old dealers, we have the 40 to 60-year-old dealers, and we have the 60 to 80-year-old dealers. So let's get into it. We're going to start out with the 20 to 40-year-old. The number one category for the 20 to 40-year-old age group is Art Nouveau. This style has surged in popularity among younger buyers, especially for lighting, jewelry, and decorative objects like vases and mirrors. Its blend of organic forms and semi-modernistic appeal connects with contemporary tastes, often bridging classic and modern styles. Dealers report high demand and strong prices, especially for nature-inspired pieces. The second category is Art Deco. While trailing just behind Art Nouveau, Art Deco remains a top seller with strong sales in clocks, jewelry, lighting, furniture, and case goods. Many dealers believe its staying power has now surpassed mid-century modern. As we've seen with a lot of these shows on Netflix, The Crown, Downton Abbey, various shows like that, it's really bringing the older aesthetic back into vogue. Okay, the third category for 20 to 40-year-old dealers is mid-century modern. It's holding strong despite fluctuating sales. Premium prices are commanded by designer pieces, particularly in metal, leather, and barware. Dealers report ongoing interest, but face challenges sourcing quality inventory due to a high prevalence of reproductions. A lot of reproductions in the mid-century modern space, so you got to be careful if you want the original thing. The fourth most popular category, space collectibles. This niche market has grown with the rise of SpaceX and media coverage of space missions. Popular items include SpaceX and Artemis pins, astronaut autographs, and Apollo models. New series like Star Wars and For All Mankind have contributed to growing interest. I haven't seen that one, might have to check it out. Here we are down here, number 5, the fifth most popular category, and I'm kind of excited about this because now we're getting into my passion, is Victorian furniture. Victorian pieces have seen a huge resurgence, particularly with millennials and eco-conscious Gen Z buyers. Practical items like chests, desks, and chairs are popular alongside smaller decorative pieces. Interest has been boosted by shows like Bridgerton and The Gilded Age. So one thing I want to point out here before we carry on is that I was just working on a reel for Renaissance style furniture, which we think of as being Victorian in the 1880s and to the 1900s or so. A lot of people probably don't realize that the reason Renaissance style furniture came into vogue in the late 19th century was the result of industrialization. Industrialization in the 1830s had allowed a lot of people to start buying a lot of furniture, and it was mass produced. And there was a backlash toward the end of the 19th century, causing people to demand more personalized, individualized pieces, more highly carved pieces, not mass produced. And I found that to be interesting. Okay, the sixth category is textiles. Vintage textiles, especially items from popular designers, remain in high demand. Sales of 1970s jeans, designer handbags, and sneakers continue to rise, though competition for high-quality inventory has intensified as more vendors enter the market. And here I sit in my vintage 60s clothing. Anyway, number 7, surrealist paintings. Surrealist paintings have made a comeback, with mid-20th century works gaining value. Pieces by lesser-known artists like Fernand Caret and Philippe Creverock are becoming increasingly popular, with younger collectors drawn to their connection to today's complex, technology-driven world. I also asked in the reel the other day if perhaps with this AI and the technology and the robots, if perhaps we might be starting to feel a sense of that nostalgia to a simpler time, almost a parallel to what we might have seen in the late 19th century when people were going back to Renaissance style furniture as they were looking back at the late 18th century. I appear to be going down that path myself. Carrying on with that vein of thought, the next category is early Americana Canadiana. Although slightly down this year, sales in this category continue to grow, with buyers focusing more on Victorian accent pieces over rustic Americana. Popular items include coffee tables, blanket boxes, and smaller furniture for modern homes. Okay, moving on to the 9th category for 20 to 40-year-old dealers, ornate chandeliers and lighting, particularly from the early 20th century, remain popular, especially in Victorian and Art Nouveau styles. Again, I say this goes back to some of the TV shows, and I say all of this probably goes back to that desire to get back to a simpler past because things are moving so rapidly, and I think that the desire for real things will continue. But anyway, demand is rising across all regions, and dealers report high prices for quality vintage pieces. Now here's an interesting one. The last category is Japanese antiques and vintage. A new entry. I was going to say I've never seen this before. Japanese antiques and mid-century vintage pieces are attracting younger buyers. Items like Netsuke, woodblock, prints, and designer lighting Maidoguchi are in demand, with rising prices and limited supply. I have no idea if I pronounced those right, but anyway. Moving on. The second age grouping, 40 to 60-year-old dealers. I myself am in that category. Art Nouveau is number one. It's at the top. Art Nouveau has surged in popularity, becoming a top antique category. Now notice that it is at the top now in both the 20 and 40-year-old dealer age rankings. So it's just the older furniture styles, as I've been saying for the last 2 years, are moving up, and it's coming to fruition right now. Art Nouveau has surged in popularity, becoming a top antique category. Its flowing lines and organic motifs, bridging Art Deco and mid-century modern, appeal to contemporary buyers seeking unique character and craftsmanship. Demand is higher for items like dragonfly tables and certain cabinets. Original inventory is harder to find, leading to rising prices. That's not the only thing leading to rising prices. I may talk a little bit about that at the very end of the video. I don't want to bore you with my past in economics and finance until maybe the end. Now, the second category for 40 to 60-year-old dealers is automobilia and petrolina. This category remains a strong performer, with prices steadily increasing despite market challenges. Collectors, especially affluent males, continue to derive demand for items like gas pumps, signage, and oil cans. Popularity is bolstered by media exposure, and competition for prime pieces is fierce. Moving on to the third category, folk art. Folk art has experienced significant growth in interest and sales, driven by younger buyers seeking unique handcrafted items. Popular pieces include paintings, weather vanes, and painted furniture, often with regional significance. Okay, next up is Art Deco. Art Deco has seen a resurgence with strong sales across traditional furniture and case pieces. While once linked to mid-century modern, Art Deco now stands on its own. Now here we go again in the second age category from 40 to 60, with mid-century modern lagging behind some of your other more traditional categories. It remains popular but has lost some market share to other postmodern styles. Dealers on the coast are reporting declining sales, while those in the heartland continue to see brisk business. And now, once again, we are at my own personal favorite category. Well, actually, Victorian, early, mid, and late, as well as Georgian and earlier if you can find it. I like it all. Victorian furniture has made a strong comeback, especially with younger, eco-conscious buyers. Popular items include upholstered chairs, marble-top tables, and wicker furniture. The resurgence is driven by affordability, sustainability, and renewed interest in ornate design. That would be your Renaissance style furniture in part. Supply remains plentiful, yet prices are still trending upward, I think. We'll see what happens this coming year. I'm going to kind of hold back on my predictions this year. I've predicted rising prices for the past 2 years, and I'm just not sure now. Wicker. Next category. Victorian wicker furniture with its ornate designs has become popular again, particularly in stylish interiors. Brands like Haywood Wakefield are in demand due to their modern aesthetic. While prices are stable, they are expected to rise as inventory remains scarce. Now here's an interesting category, quilts. Antique quilts, especially from the Amish and Mennonite communities, are enjoying mainstream popularity. Their geometric patterns and quality craftsmanship make them ideal for blending with contemporary decor. Okay, so this next category is costume jewelry. Costume jewelry remains highly popular, with designer pieces from Haskell, Trilfari, and others fetching top prices. Dealers face increasing difficulty sourcing quality inventory, especially as more is being acquired for online resale. Prices are expected to continue rising as demand intensifies. Okay, now we come down to toys and board games. Vintage toys and board games have seen a strong resurgence, with items like classic board games, action figures, and die-cast toys reaching top prices. Prices are climbing as nostalgia drives demand. There we go again with that nostalgia theme. I think it's here. I think it's going to get stronger. Okay, that was it. That was the last category for the 20 to 40 year age dealers. Now we're moving on to the seasoned veterans of the trade, the 60 through 80-year-old dealers. Let's see what their customers have been buying. The number one category, drum roll, Art Deco, has surpassed Chinese antiques to become the top collectible category. I know my grandma used to be a great collector of Chinese antiques. Anyway, prices for authentic period pieces have nearly doubled, with items like lounge chairs, French tables, and chrome sconces selling well. Original inventory is becoming scarce. Second category now for the oldest dealer group, Chinese antiques. Chinese antiques is still up there in the second space slot. They remain popular despite geopolitical tensions. Textiles, containers, and brushwork, artwork continue to achieve high prices, though counterfeits remain a concern. Let's move on. The next category, the third category for the oldest dealer grouping, is folk art. Folk art's popularity has risen sharply, moving from 8th to 3rd place. Items like quilts, carvings, and whirligigs are favored for blending with contemporary decor. Now there's a word I haven't heard for a while, whirligigs. The trend, which started in the South, is now apparently widespread. Okay, here we are again. Time for my favorite category. It's Victorian, early, mid, and late. So we're talking about the entire length of her reign from, what was it, the 30s up until about 1901. I hope it was the 30s. I should know that. Anyway, top items include silver flasks, pendants, cranberry glass, and upholstered chairs. Availability is plentiful. So plenty of it out there. But prices aren't going down. It'll be interesting to see what happens this year. Now, the next category, again, which has taken back seat. Now, several years ago, MCM seemed to be all the rage, but it's kind of taking a back seat to more of the traditional styles now. But anyway, it has experienced a decline in popularity, particularly on the coast. And we know what they say. All the trends start on the coast and make their way inward. While demand persists here in the heartland for now, prices have stabilized and sourcing high-end pieces remains difficult. Up next, now it's time for my second favorite category. Actually, I would put this in an equally favorite category with Victorian. We are at Georgian. We are now talking about late 18th century, actually most of the 18th century, into the early 19th century. Georgian furniture has seen steady growth, influenced by popular media like Bridgerton and The Crown. Prices are rising and supply remains ample, making it a promising category. I certainly hope so, because that is the type of furniture and history that I love to see preserved. So let's preserve it and let's don't paint it. All right, next category, antique and vintage watches. Wow. Vintage wristwatches, especially Rolex and Omega, have seen a continued price increase. Celebrity endorsements have amplified demand. Counterfeit watches are common, but original inventory is still available. Good news for all the folks buying vintage watches. The next category, now this is interesting because I do not recall seeing this in the previous 2 years that I have done this, and that is Windsor chairs. Windsor chairs have gained popularity as a bridging piece between traditional and modern design. I will say over the last year or so, I've noticed that these chairs are fairly popular. They don't hang around long for the most part. And that, my antique-loving friends, brings us to the next category, ephemera. The demand for paper collectibles like travel brochures, posters, and vintage board games has grown steadily. Items from the 1960s through the 80s, particularly posters, are seeing rising prices. Supply remains abundant. I would expect for supply to remain abundant. I think I still have things in my bedroom from the 80s that probably haven't moved since then. Oh, now here we come to an excellent category. I have a ton of these. I buy and sell these all the time, and I collect for myself. Victorian paintings. Victorian paintings, including oils and watercolors, have experienced a resurgence in interest. Sporting scenes, portraits, and landscapes are fetching higher prices, with ample stock available. I actually did an entire video dedicated to the concept of preserving wealth through antique paintings. I can't remember, did I put that on the Old Europe channel or the Antique Acquisition channel? I can't remember. Anyway. All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for the summary. I guess I will throw in just a little bit of my own thoughts on where this is headed. Honestly, the predictions have been pretty good for the last couple of years. As I mentioned, my history and my past is in the economics and finance field, so I can't help being interested in it. And what I will say is this year, I'm not terribly confident about what's going to happen. We have some really good intentions of trying to bring down inflation, but, you know, can the government actually stop spending? And government spending is the primary cause of inflation. Don't be fooled. Excess money printing being monetized, and I don't know how that stops. So I don't have confidence that inflation is going to be easy to tackle. Now, whether or not that inflation spills over from important goods like food and housing into things that we don't necessarily have to have, like antiques and collectibles, really depends on the state of the economy. Because if the economy remains good, I think we're okay. If the economy collapses, then yeah, you could definitely see some falling prices. But right now, that's not really in the cards that I can tell, although there's a significant risk of it. Okay, last thing I will say, and then I will let you go, is thank you very much for the folks over at the Asheford Institute of Antiques for putting this out. The survey was conducted from January 2024 to December 2024 by the research staff at the Asheford Institute. The survey consisted of a sampling of over 2,659 current students and postgraduates, that's their students of the Institute, that are actively employed or working within the antiques, collectibles, and vintage marketplace within the United States and Canada. All those who participated in the survey operate their own antiques and vintage or estate sale appraisal businesses. So there you have it. That's where we got the information, at least a lot of it. And I hope you've enjoyed it. Please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and we'll see you next time.